Housing and Regeneration Committee of this February. Can I ask you to put yourself on mute as we're getting some feedback? Please, if you can do, thank you very much. Do we...
Morning, convener. There's 4 apologies I have at the moment. Councillors Doolan, Kelly, Kerr and McManus. I've got a couple of substitute members who are going to be attending. I don't see them on at the moment, but Councillor Duffy is going to attend for Councillor Kelly, and Councillor T Johnson is going to attend for Councillor McManus in terms of Standing Order 64A.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Get my agenda in the right.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Can I submit apologies for Councillor Callum Curry, please?
Of course, thank you very much, Megan. Any other apologies?
Can I just say that Alex McVeigh is having problems. Oh, he's actually got on. He was having problems to connect, but he's on now.
Excellent. Thanks very much. See people just coming in just now. Just can I go on to agenda item 1, declarations of interest in terms of ethical standards in Public Life Scotland Act 2000. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Megan, I see that you've got Pat. So Megan, you first, please.
Sorry, Chair, that was for the apologies I was submitting for Councillor Curry, not for a declaration. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Pat, you've got a declaration of interest.
Yes, convener, it is on agenda item 11D as a member of the Mayor's Board.
Thanks very much, Pat. I appreciate that. No other declarations of interest, colleagues? No, we will move on to the operational papers before us. The first paper is incentives to downsize regarding under occupation. Stephen, can I come to you on this, please? Stephen Llewellyn, are you on the call?
Convener, Stephen just joined just as you were introducing him, so it might take a moment or two just for him to come on to the meeting.
I'll resist doing a drum roll. Stephen, are you with us? Stephen Llewellyn?
Hi, convener. Yes, I am. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. You've hardly got a chance to get yourself comfy, and we're getting straight into the paper. Can you go through the report?
Certainly, convener. Thank you. So, agenda item 2 is the report incentive to downsize. The previous committee members had expressed some concern that there were tenants who were living in larger family homes, particularly elderly tenants, that they were not being given sufficient help and assistance via the housing policy to downsize. In this committee report, then you will see that the service is considered how we can assist, and the paper you have in front of you is split into 2 different recommendations. So one is to amend the allocation policy. To amend the allocation policy, however, in line with Housing Scotland legislation, the Housing Scotland Act, we require it to actually start a consultation exercise to do that. And amendment in the allocation policy would be to bring the under occupation policy in line with the overcrowding policy. The overcrowding policy just now gives you a set number of points to begin with, so 40 points if you're overcrowded, and then 20 points for each room that you're actually requiring for overcrowded. The under occupation policy doesn't. It only gives you one set policy just now, or one set range of points, so it's 40 points to begin with. If you have 3 additional rooms that you're under occupying, you don't get an additional 20 points per room. So to have a bit of parity and equality between the 2 of them, we would be proposing to amend the allocation policy. And the second part of the report is the incentives. So to offer incentives for people who are sitting in 3-4 bedroom houses to downsize, and the range of incentives are laid out in the report. The overall package in terms of incentives is £1,500 we have put in. That's in line with the Housing Act, where if someone's got to move that we're doing through the reprovision just now, it's a home loss payment of £1,500. So the rationale behind the £1,500 has been brought in the basis of what we do just now for tenants who are having to move in terms of a demolition programme. And that's kind of a broad background to the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We coming in, and I'll take folk in turn from the chat bar as I see them. Alan Valentine, come to you first, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can I welcome the Housing Department's proposal to offer assistance and incentives to our tenants to downsize. The Scottish Government has been mitigating the bedroom tax since 2003 through funding through DHP discretionary housing payments for those affected to the tune of £275 million. The bedroom tax was one of the earlier austerity bills that the Tory government introduced and was only ever going to affect people with housing benefit and universal credit. This initiative was first proposed by the SNP group in the 2012-13 HRA budget, and then again in the 2014-15 HRA budget. So I'm glad that the administration has caught up with our thinking from 7 and 8 years ago. Thank you.
Well, you know, good ideas are good ideas. The Fiona Fotheringham, come to you. I thought we were going to get a question there, but it didn't. It was just a narrative. Colleagues, if we can keep ourselves to questions, it would be helpful. Fiona Fotheringham, yourself next.
Thank you. I've got a wee bit of both. Just to thank, first of all, I do welcome the paper, and I know that I was probably the one that is referring to on the committee with a constituents. I have raised this issue a couple of times because to be common sense with the current policy, because I did have somebody sitting in a four-bedroom house adapted for disability on her own, desperate to move, and she still is and has gone through 2 years now.
Councillor Fotheringham, you don't mind if sorry to interrupt. I think the wee mic bit on your headphones, if you put down to your mouth,
Cool.
be a bit
Sorry.
clearer. Apologies for that, Councillor.
It's because I was shouting at my kids 2 seconds ago, Martin. You didn't want to hear that. So yeah, I don't know what you heard there and what you didn't, but as I said, I did obviously bring these concerns to committee, and I do welcome the report. And common sense has finally prevailed. Now the question I have is, how would rent arrears be dealt with within this policy? Because in the circumstances that I certainly dealt with, there was rent arrears involved, and that then obviously took them out of the waiting lists and the points because they couldn't be reallocated a house while they were sitting in rent arrears. So can you kind of talk us through what would be the case with rent arrears in this policy? Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Stephen, yourself.
Councillor Fotheringham, again, you'll be well aware we put lots and lots of resources into tackling the rent arrears. The rent arrears figures just now have pretty much stayed the same from last April, where other councils went up, and a lot of that's because of what this committee and what we've done to mitigate that in terms of the £1 million initially we put up for the rent relief fund. The issue will continue to be, the housing policy is quite clear, if someone is in rent arrears, then we'll not let them move. However, in mitigation, if people are paying, again, in terms of the Housing Act and our policy is, if people are paying a regular amount of money and it's reducing, then that gives us the scope to do that. So as long as someone was engaging with the service and we've got a proposal in place and it's been maintained, then we would look to assist them. The issue is when people owe us a couple of £1,000, and we've experienced that before, and we've spoken about this before as well, then people don't engage, or they wait to engage until it's too late. So as long as people are engaging with us, and it is within the policy, we would assist them as much as we can. And that's why the range of incentives, although it's a £1,500, you've probably seen in the report, we also put other things in there in terms of actually physically helping people as well, in terms of removal companies, because a lot of elderly people, they've got nobody else out there to help them. So we're not just looking at the cash incentive, the financial incentive, we're also looking at the actual practical. So again, the cash or the financial incentive could assist in terms of arrears as well, the way it does through the reprovisioning.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Thanks very much. Tracy, you've come to yourself. Tracy Carricker.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I was wondering, is the incentive, is it only going to be offered to people in properties that the council have indicated a need for it, and I'm meaning in areas that they've indicated a need for, not just the size? Because I do have, I've had a lot of inquiries from constituents that they just believe that they're actually going to be stuck in this house because they feel nobody else is going to want to move into that area. I'd love that to be clarified. Thanks.
Stephen.
So within the report, that again, I need to quickly look at it, but there's no reference within the report to actual specific areas. The reference in the report is about the actual house, the demand for the house. So again, committee have been concerned over the years that at 3 and 4 bedrooms, for instance, there isn't any. And the buyback has also been hugely successful in terms of what Pamela's team have done in terms of buying back bigger houses as well. So the report's been written in such a way it's about the actual size and type that there's a demand for. The other side of that just now, as you're aware, because of reprovisioning, there's lots of 3-bedroom flats in the reprovisioning, Shawhead back flats, for instance, in Coatbridge, and they're part of the demolition programme and will be replaced by 2, 3, 4-bedroom properties as well. But there's no reference in the report to actual an area. The reference in the report is actually the property size.
I hope that brings you comfort, Tracy, as we progress. Any other? I'm not seeing any other. Oh, Willie Goldie, I see yourself there. Sorry.
Heather, I'm trying to get in, but I'm not coming up in the chat bar. I do
Right, okay,
apologise for interrupting.
I'll come to you next after Willie, Mary.
Thanks, convener. It's question is really in areas where there's limited council housing and it's other registered social landlords. Is there going to be some kind of discussion between the council? Would that be possible? Just thinking about Cumbernauld, where you maybe get sanctuary or whatever. Whether they could be incorporated into this similar thing, because I think everywhere in Scotland's got a similar problem.
The council at the moment, sorry,
no, carry on, Stephen.
The council and under myself, we do meet regularly with all the RSLs across the council. There's an RSL forum, and it's on the agenda for the next forum to discuss. It's for individual RSLs to determine whether they're going to have such a policy and mirror the council's policy. There is actually only 2. You've seen in the report. There's actually only 2 or 3 actually other local authorities across Scotland that are actually doing such a scheme. As I say, it's on the agenda, so we're letting them. It's on the agenda, depending on what was going to happen today in terms of committee approval or not. But it's certainly on the agenda to discuss, and we'll obviously be encouraging RSLs to do that. We cannot use though our HRA funding to subsidise them for them to bring such a scheme in, but we'll certainly be encouraging them. And I can report back to committee at a later date, Councillor Goldie, what the outcome of that is.
Thank you very much. Mary, can I come to you?
Thanks, Heather. Thanks very much. I have several issues here because at the end of the day, have we enough houses to accommodate people who would apply for out a 4 apartment into a smaller house? Now, most people I've spoke to, what they're saying is that they don't want a 1-bedroom because if they took ill or and wanted someone to stay to them, they don't have that accommodation. So that worries me that we don't have enough houses of the appropriate size. I'm sure that could be addressed. I'm sure we could deal with it. Also, would this be if people were private houses, how would it affect? Would we take the house off them, buy it back and put them into a smaller house as well? Also, I came across last year a house in Langloan who approached the council to buy. It was a 4 apartment and the council refused her and said there was no demand in that area. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks very much, Mary. A series of questions there. Can you respond to them, please?
Yeah, just to reassure Councillor Gurley, the bulk of our housing stock is actually 2-bedroom stock and not 1-bedroom. So a lot of people who are actually listed from 4 apartments actually list for the 2 bedrooms, the 3 apartments. That was, if you go back to Councillor Valentine mentioned the bedroom tax, the bulk of the people, 6,000 people impacted in 2014 were in 2 bedrooms. All our towers, for instance, were 2 bedrooms, the vast majority. So we don't see that. If you look at the overall numbers we're talking about, 600 people that could be affected that are on the list just now, we don't actually see that being a big issue. And yeah, a lot of people do say that they would prefer to go into a 2-bedroom. The second point was in terms of is it only council tenants only. Yeah, obviously in terms of the buyback, we do have a buyback policy. and we can look at that, but we can't incentivise. This is only for council tenants, for us to free up a council tenant that's a bigger house for someone else. And in terms of the final bit within Lang Loan, the other issue, I mean, obviously we're talking about a specific case here, but there are issues where people do contact the council regularly who want us to buy back the house, but they also want us to then rehouse them. And the current policy just now is that it's got to be occupation, it's got to be an empty property. If I buy somebody's house back and I take the responsibility, we're not actually reducing the waiting list by doing that. So the buyback policy just now is that it's an unoccupied property. And I know that we regularly get inquiries from people who want us to buy back their three-bedroom house, but they also want us to give them a guarantee we will then house them. And that's not freeing up a house for me. And we've spoken about this at committee before, whether we look to change the policy in the future.
Could you come in again, Heather, if you don't mind?
Yes,
the house I'm talking about, the lady had died. The house was empty.
Mary, can I stop? Mary, can I stop you there?
Yeah.
That's a specific ward, specific case, and those issues need to be considered in detail and out with the committee forum. So myself and Stephen will be happy to talk to you about specific cases, but I think it's important that we don't get into an individual family business you know, at committee. This is about a policy decision, and of course we have to reflect on families across North Lanarkshire when we make those decisions, but it's important that we are sensitive to individual family circumstances. Thanks for that. Are there any subsequent? Megan, I see that you've requested to come in.
We've spoken about not sought after areas, but what about the sought after areas? Because I've got a few in my ward, and there has been circumstances, and I think it's happened throughout the whole of North Lanarkshire, where the council, I don't want to use the word forceful, but they have attempted to try and get the house back off individuals, which has caused a lot of upset. So it's just to make sure that the points raised within the paper that it is voluntary, that is the case. I'm just looking for reassurance on that, Chair, because I think there's lots of factors. One, for example, being loneliness and isolation, that would mean that someone actually moving out of that area would not be beneficial to them.
I will say here from the chair, this is entirely a voluntary scheme. This is about people who want to move, being supported and assisted to move if they do not have the means and support mechanisms to enable them to. You know, when you sign your tenancy agreement, you don't sign it for a time limited nature. You sign it for as long as you need that, and it meets your housing needs. You know, that's there, that's your home. It might be a council house, but it's your home. This is an entirely voluntary scheme. Any other questions, colleagues? No. The recommendations are on page 7, is to note the contents of the report grant approval for consultation to the change of policy and to note the suggested incentives and approve the scheme in principle. We will come back post consultation and give update, because I'm sure there will be learning as we roll out this policy that we'll want to bring back to committee. Can we agree the recommendations on page 7, colleagues?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. Can we move on to item 3? It is the Community Safety CCTV report. Tonya, are you taking this report?
No, I'm going to take it again, convener, as well.
My apologies, Stephen.
No problem. And Tonya's here, as you said, well, as people know now, so Tonya's here just to take any questions if I can't answer them. So, convener, in September 2018, committee approved that the town centre activities be brought in-house, and that the services be delivered by the former TCA, which sat under Housing Solutions under myself. TCA is now known as a community safety hub. It delivers a range of services. These services are outlined in the report at 1.2. The service manages the council's CCTV public space network. The service runs 24 hours a day and is a vital part of the overall strategy of tackling community safety across the council. The service is currently operating in excess, operating and monitoring in excess of over 1,200 CCTV cameras, and 2.2 the report outlines a summary of the detected incidents since the service was brought back in-house 18 months ago, nearly 2 years ago now. The camera system across North Lanarkshire, although it continues to be hugely successful at detecting incidents, the cameras are also a significant council resource and wider community safety resource as a deterrent, reducing crime across communities. As well as tackling community safety, the camera operatives also have other duties, and one of the ones you'll see in the report, they detected and located and successful in finding over 300 missing people, and this is a really, really good thing that we're able to do, and it's testament to the professionalism of the camera operators. The Central Monitoring Hub is an excellent facility, although we can't just now because obviously of the restrictions, but if any member would like to actually visit, then there's an open invite out for members once the restrictions are lifted. It is an excellent facility to go and see. You walk in through the door, you never ever realise what's going to be behind that door. It's an excellent facility right in the middle of North Lanarkshire, and as I say, it's an open invitation for anybody once the restrictions are lifted to actually go and look at it, and I'd encourage members to do so. I'm sure Tonya and the team would be happy to see you, and happy to take any questions between myself and Tonya.
Thank you very much, Stephen and Tonya. Can I just highlight section 2.4, colleagues? This is a nationally recognised service that's provided some excellent community safety outcomes to our community, and indeed those who are traversing through our authority, some very vulnerable people. So my congratulations to the team for their continued hard work and positive endeavours. Alan Valentine, you have a question.
Thanks, Chair. Hello, Tonya. Long time no see. As a former member of the board, I've got to say that the recognition of the service with the 2 awards is excellent. However, it is a continuation of the excellence when it was an ALIO as well. And my question today is of a slight concern in the wording in para 2.2, the final paragraph, that there's been an increase of 10% in the productivity. Now, I'm reading that in a way that says, well, is that suggesting that they weren't as productive as an ALIO? And I can assure you, as a former board member, they were. So I just want clarification of where this 10% better has come from. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Stephen,
Well,
is it yourself that's
what
going to take that?
I'm going to actually on the basis that obviously Tonya was a manager before and continues to be the manager, I'm going to actually let Tonya answer that one.
Thank you. Morning, Tonya, and you come.
Morning. Hi, Councillor Valentine. Nice to see you again. The productivity at CCTV has increased 10%, but you'll know, as a former director, we increased every single year. So it's just another thing. What I would say is the partnership working with NLC has brought in even more work for us, and that's why productivity has gone up greatly as well, 10%. So it's about the number of captures we're getting and the amount of discs we're producing for the police. So again, we just keep going up.
Thanks very much.
That
Alan,
answers your question.
That answered your question, Alan? Do you need anything?
No, I don't need anything else. I know Tonya works well, and so do the rest of the staff. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And it's good to see that nationally recognised too. Alan Graham, can I ask you to come in here, please? Former board member 2, of course.
Indeed. Thank you, Convener. Again, I would like to acknowledge the excellent awards recognition of the service. The team was superbly managed by Tonya, and I would also like to offer my thanks to the contributions from Councillors Valentine and Douglas. They were both proactive on the board, and they were both constructive members. So Tonya and the team, well done. Excellent job.
Thank you very much for those positive comments, Councillor Graham. So we have the recommendations there is to note the performance of the service and recognise the ongoing positive impact of the delivery. Can we agree that recommendation, colleagues? Excellent, thanks ever so much. Moving on to agenda item 4, it's the approval to commence procurement. Brian, can I come to you, please?
Thanks, Convener. This is just a standard report to get approval to commence procurements for various low voltage electrical contracts and UPCB window doors and repairs. So other than that, the details in the report for presentation. Happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat bar. It's a comprehensive report. Any questions? There are no questions. Can we approve the commencement of the new procurement exercises, colleagues? Thank you very much. We will move on now to agenda, which is the development of the Housing Asset Management Plan 2021 to 2026. Brian, are you taking this?
Thanks again, Convener. Cameron Barrs here, the investment manager. Cameron's going to take us through this report, Convener, if you don't mind, so I'll pass over to Cameron.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Convener. Morning, everyone. I'm going to talk to a report this morning around the development of the Housing Asset Management Plan for 21-26. The Council periodically prepares a Housing Asset Management Plan which sets out the strategic direction for asset management and its approach on a periodical basis. This report provides a brief overview on how the HAMP was developed and also the priorities and actions contained within it. So the recommended practice was guided, or the development of the plan itself was guided by the Scottish Housing Regulator's asset management practices. And in 2019, the Asset Management Working Group started out the process of developing the Housing Asset Management Plan. The ambition within it, or the key objectives within it, is inspired by the recent centenary of the council housing in North Lanarkshire. And the vision will be realised through the development of 4 key priorities. Namely, we'll help deliver homes North Lanarkshire needs to grow, we'll provide high quality, well-maintained homes, we'll tackle climate change and fuel poverty, and we'll improve our systems and the use of data. The first 3 priorities are shared with higher level strategic plans for economic regeneration, ensuring that the strategies are aligned both from a top-down approach, but also on a strategic alignment across the council as well. The final priority emerged from consultation and self-assessment, and its delivery will underpin the success of the plan. This priority also enables a range of key actions where cross-fertilisation of ideas in terms of the enterprise contract and digital NL to feed into our overall strategic objectives. The action plan within the Housing Asset Management Plan contains 43 separate actions, and these are a mixture of carry forward actions from the previous HAMP, ongoing development, and new ones that have come out through the consultation. The HAMP's already been endorsed by the North Lanarkshire Tenants Federation, as well as being approved by SNT and CNT. You just see on the final 2.8 there, it's also got a cross-cutting theme in terms of excuse me, the programmes of work across the council that actually feeds into, so there's contributing factors across the board. In terms of the ongoing governance, we'll review the HAMP on a quarterly basis and we'll report progress to on a future committee on an annual basis. I'll have to answer any kind of questions on the development of the HAMP from anybody on the call today.
Thanks very much, Cameron. A substantial report and plan that we had before us. Alan Valentine, I see you've got a question.
Thanks, Chair. Cameron, I'm looking for clarification in 2 points. On page 38, it's page 38 of the papers, but it's page 14 of the report. I don't know if you can get that okay.
Yes, got it, thanks.
Right, okay, so there's a statement below the table at the end of the second paragraph, and this may include considering whether we may dispose of void properties in limited circumstances. Now I'm going to ask my second question, and then if that's okay with the Chair, and then you can deal with this. What I want to know is, what does that mean? Are we going to, if we've got 4 in a block and there's 3 owner occupiers, will we consider actually marketing the 4th one so that we don't have any council tenants in that? That's my question there. And in the next page, on page 39, just above the graphs, there's a statement at the end of the paragraph. By 2025, social landlords are unable to rent properties related below an EPC D. Currently, just 3.4% of our homes meet this EPC2 standard, and analysis suggests that around 4 in 10 may be unable to reach the standard due to technical difficulties. That's 40%. My reading of that is that by 2025, we will be unable to rent 40% of our properties. So maybe if you could clarify those 2 points for me, please.
Sure, Councillor. So in relation to the first one, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of ownership and the mixed tenure arrangements in our blocks. As we all know, there's challenges around getting investment into mixed tenure blocks, specifically where we're trying to get owners involved. So where we're in the majority or the minority, we'll engage with our colleagues across the housing departments to see if there's an opportunity for us to possibly remove our interest from a particular block, so that either kind of frees up the ability for us to kind of our obligations in terms of investment, but also where we're in the majority, we would look to kind of try and proactively buy into kind of blocks as well, just so that we can ensure that ongoing investment within our existing stock is maintained and enhanced as we kind of go forward. I don't know if that answers your initial kind of question. Okay, and in relation to the East 2 question, yes, I take your point around the kind of 40%. It's a bit of a kind of misnomer that, and probably the Scottish Government have been quite pragmatic in their approach in terms of rolling out East 2, and that they've softened the narrative in terms of it being less binary, in terms of it's either in or it's out. But with that comes this problem with terminology. So the EPC banding of a D by 2025, we won't be able to relet houses which are below a D. So if there's an existing tenant who has been in there for 10, 15, 20 years and their property doesn't have an EPC band of E or below, then we're not going to go and remove them or on that basis. It's just if they move out, we won't be able to relet it until we brought it up to a band E or higher. In relation to the question around the 4 and 10, again, it's down to what we can actually achieve. This is a snapshot in time. So based on the information we've got just now, we project that if everything was to stand still, 4 and 10 of our properties wouldn't meet an EPC rating of a B. However, that doesn't mean that it won't meet ISH, because as long as you can demonstrate to the Scottish Government that you've done everything that is practical to invest in that property within the kind of parameters of what is reasonable. And the example I'll use is if there's a house that's valued at 100,000 and to get it to an EPC rating of a B, you need to spend another 100,000. That's impractical, but that's not to say if you do everything in your power to invest to make it as energy efficient as possible and you only reach a C, it would still meet the ISH requirements under the terms of the Scottish Government. It's worth all just as a wee kind of final footnote to that. As I say, this is a snapshot in time. That's not to say that as we go through and by the time, if I come to it in 5 years to present the next housing asset management plan, technology may have moved on, costs may have moved on, so that £100,000 investment that I referred to earlier on, in 5 years' time that could be £25,000 and it could be more practical for us to kind of do so. We're not kind of setting this out as a one-shot deal. It's very much a moving kind of target and a moving feast for us in terms of an incremental kind of investment programme.
Thanks very much, Cameron. That was a really helpful response. Alan, any supplementary to that?
No, that's great. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much. Anne Weir, come to yourself next. Hello, Anne, are you there?
Sorry, trying to unmute.
I think we can hear you. Hello, Anne, are you there? And I'll give you a moment to...
Right, I think I'm here now.
Right, you're here, and you come.
Page 36, we provide high quality, well-maintained homes. What I'm concerned about is the number of people that contact me saying they want rehoused because the house is damp. We know that North Lanarkshire Council doesn't rent them a damp house, that they've caused the damp. How do you say to these tenants, look, you've caused this. I really am concerned about the number of damp houses caused by tenants, because we can't relet it.
Yeah, I can come in on that one, Chair, if you like.
Yes, please. Thanks, Cameron.
Yes, Councillor, it's a valid point, and it's all about education, to be honest with you, and behavioural change. Because as you rightly say, we don't let out properties that are damp at the kind of outset. It's all about educating the tenants on their environment and what it means. So putting, drying your washing on the radiators and not keeping your windows open doesn't help the fabric of the building. And it's not lost on us that this isn't just an educational progress or initiative that we need to kind of take forward. So we are actually kind of engaging with, and this is where the digital and colleagues come in. We're looking at the use of technology to allow us to get data from properties in terms of the use of Internet of Things and sensors that allows us to capture the environment in a kind of a cross section of homes. We're actually about to kind of start a pilot on that allows us to kind of inform tenants to say, well, if you kind of put in proper ventilation, if you open your windows, etc. This is the data, this is the difference. So we're going to be kind of modelling the data across different parameters and different environments. But education, you know, in terms of the tenants, is a critical one for us.
So,
Supplementary, Anne? I need you to come off mute again. In you come. You're still on mute, Anne. There you go.
back in, right.
That's you.
Right. You're saying about education, which is great, but do you maybe that sounds bad, but I just think these tenants should be penalised for ruining a property, because it's sort of lost to the housing stock because you can't re-let it till you've dried it out.
It's a very difficult one, that, councillor, because, you know, what we're asking tenants to effectively do is open their windows at a time when it's winter, and if they're in a kind of state of fuel poverty where they're trying to heat their homes, it's counterintuitive to open their window in the heart of winter when they're trying to kind of keep their homes kind of warm. So I take your point, you know, but it's a fine balance in terms of giving those people as much information as they can and giving them the tools to be able to kind of do it, but being supported by various investment programmes through proper ventilation and us going out and giving them advice on a face-to-face level.
I'm a wee bit concerned that we're kind of getting culture regarding our tenants here. I think information is key. We need to support folk through education, but we also need to enable people to understand things like about ambient temperature, not switching our heating on and off all the time, trying to keep things in a more constant temperature. I know that where possible, design solutions are put in, and it's great to hear how the technology is assisting in that process. But sometimes it's as simple as, you know, when new windows are going in, the vents are turned up the way rather than down the way, so the draft does not fail, if you like, immediately into the home, but it still creates that ventilation and circulation that's vital. So I'm concerned that there's a bit of blaming going on here. We've got older properties, I think, at times, and we've got newer ones, and the key thing is like, let's make sure that we keep informing our tenants so that we can make informed choices as they can going forward regarding, you know, efficiently heating the property and being good tenants too. And
I agree, but when does this education click in? When you give them the property?
And I'm not going to get into a dialogue on one issue here, but what I would say is the service and I have spoken, like, in essence, like webinars, videos for people to watch. They're accessible in multiple devices, so they can help people understand fully how to work their heating systems, understand why ventilation is important and things like that. Yes, it is spoken through, but it should be at various points across your tenancy that it shouldn't be about one, you know, you get information once and that's all. So it's about how we keep on that dialogue throughout. But thanks very much for your question. Councillor Morgan, can I come to you next, please?
Thanks, Convener. Can you hear me okay? Right, this isn't the best of connections either. And so, because it kicked out, I apologise, I didn't get the name of the officer that was speaking to us. I thought it was Brian, but
it's Cameron Barr, Tommy.
Oh, Cameron, right. Thanks, Heather. It's an interesting document. It's a comprehensive document, futuristic and optimistic document. But in the last couple of weeks, it might have had its legs broke to a certain extent, or been kicked in the legs by an announcement from Edinburgh that social housing budgets are not seen as a priority up there, that they've placed a cut of some £280 million in the social housing budget. I see heads nodding, that people are going to claim to be building new houses. I don't know how they're going to claim that they're building houses while at the same time cutting budgets. I have always said that the Edinburgh administration deserves merit and recognition for its input to our new house build. So the devil's in the detail of this document, Chair, and can I refer to page 45, where we specifically refer to new house build. Can we get this clear? The new house build is mainly paid for by our council tenants. Now, I know this is a strategic document, but when people are making that claim, whilst at the same time cutting the social housing budgets, the two don't reconcile. So can I ask Cameron, with that negative news that might have amended slightly with what has been described as £1 billion, the bits and bobs that were allocated within the last 48 hours. But there's clearly no priority here for social housing, or it's slipped down the list. So predicated on the funding that we have, Cameron has outlined what is the detail, and as Wally Hogg used to say, the devil's in the detail of these documents. Now you see the positive intent that we have here, and it's called the Strategic Policy Framework and Action Plan. But can Cameron give me some indication that with that negative news that it's incredulous to think with the housing crisis that we've got, that social housing budgets have been cut, that the figures that were being presented here with today, and I know it's over a 5-year spread, but it does cover a 30-year plan. Are these figures stackable? Are they tenable? Or will they be impacted negatively by not just the announcement in this month, but any future cuts to social budgets? Or can the figures that are mentioned in here, can members take confidence that what is mentioned will be delivered?
Thanks very much.
Convener, can I take
Tommy.
that one?
Yes, I think Pam, I think, can I come to Pamela first? And then that would be good if we could do that. Pamela, can I come to you first, please?
Yeah, thanks, convener. In terms of the budget for the next 5 years, the committee will be aware that that's still, I suppose, been finalised. But the indications obviously are that the budget is still in the region of about £3.4 billion. So it is broadly equivalent to the budget for the last 5 years. Having said that, as we've highlighted to committee before, the costs are going up in terms of the cost of new builds. So in terms of the proportion of the total cost that the HRA itself is funding, that has been increasing, and there's ongoing discussions at the moment with the Scottish Government around the grant levels going forward. So as you say, some of that detail is still still all to be worked out, but we're still confident that in terms of the targets that are in obviously both the report that was approved by committee, I think back in November, in terms of our targets, and obviously reflected in this HAMP, that we are still confident that we've got the resources in place to deliver those units. And obviously there's lots of challenges around that, as we've outlined at committee previously, but as things stand at the moment, we're still confident of being able to deliver those units.
Thanks for that reassurance, convener. This item comes up that's cross-referenced with monitoring reports that come up later on. So I'm glad to hear that reassurance from Pamela just now. But I won't be meandering from the issue later on when there's further development on the HRA monitoring reports as they do come up. But I'm glad to hear that the funding is there, hopefully for this 5 year, not to go altered in any particular way. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think that's answered that question. Can I come to Alan Stubbs?
Heather, you know me well enough now to see if I can find a tentative link to something that I wanted to ask that I can't find on the agenda. And since one of the officers there mentioned about houses being cold, I'm going to take us a little bit off track and ask. So one of the officers here for an update on cladding in the West End Park high rise. And what kind of update we have on that, and how long it's going to take, because I know that there's a lot of residents that are very, very cold in there with the works that are ongoing.
There's a bit of latitude there, Alan, but as I'll say, as I have said to others, please do not wait to committee if you've got questions of importance on behalf of your constituent. Raise this with the department, or indeed with myself, to ensure that you get a speedy response. Is there a quick response to Councillor Stubbs on this by Brian or a member of the team, please?
I'll answer that, convener. Yeah, the programme is due to complete at the end of the calendar year, councillor, and there is actions in place to assist the tenants in the blocks during the winter with the heating. They have the extra heating costs because of obviously the programme has been delayed as a result of COVID. So we'd be prepared to doing the external cladding work in the warmer months of the year, but unfortunately COVID's put paid to that. So we're looking at assisting the tenants in any way we can in terms of heating costs over this winter period, and in relation to the completion at the end of the calendar year for those blocks. I hope that answers your question, and I'm happy to speak to you offline if you wish about other things in that contract. Thanks.
I hope that gives you comfort, Alan, and please speak to Brian if you need further detail. The regs are on page 22. Can we note and approve the recommendations that are laid out before us?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Now to a contract variation report item.
Thanks again, convener. This is a report to committee for just to note that a contract variation is taking place on the tower structural survey programme. It's an overspend of 92,000 on a total contract value of circa 1.3 million. It came as a result of extra work, so we had to do some more investigatory work as a result of some of the findings during the structural issues. As you maybe recall, we were not surveying every single building. We had to survey buildings that were maybe a similar construction. If you've got 5 blocks built the same, we only surveyed maybe 2, but there were some things that when we're doing the surveys, we had to just clarify that the same situation was in other blocks, and with a series of no accesses, which cost us some money as well. So this is just an update on the current cost, and hopefully that will be the final account, just for approval of the committee. I'm just noting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Valentine, do you have a question here?
Thanks. Just the additional investigative works, Brian. I take it that they have not found anything untoward that we didn't already know about within the tower structures, and that may have to alter the programme for future tower demolition issues.
No, that's exactly right, Councillor, but that's why we do these further investigations, just to make sure that everything ties up and we're not having to deviate from the original programme and do things at the last minute and change things. So what the information does give us, it informs us any changes we do need to make, and so far, touch wood, we haven't had any major issues in relation to the surveys.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. The recommendations are there to note the report, colleagues. Can we note and approve the recommendations as written? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 7 is the outline HRA capital programme, and it's update to the capital plan. Brian, your name's in this report. Are you taking it? Or
yeah.
Yep, smashing.
Thanks, convener. So this is the annual report we bring every February to committee for the next year's capital programme. As you can see, the information is all there. We're proposing an increase this year up to 74 million. And we've also we've incorporated an amendment to the 5-year plan, which we took to committee last May. To tweak it a wee bit on the back of COVID to just check that everything was in place, and there was a couple of minor changes, but nothing to worry about and concerns. The overall report outlines what we're planning for the next 5 years, and the result there, the effect of COVID has been factored into the next 5-year programme as well to catch up with that. So we don't intend to try and catch all the work that we've lost this year in the next year, because that'd be unfair on contractors. They just wouldn't have the manpower to do it. So we're trying to ease it out over the next 5 years. So the report's there. Happy to take any questions on it. One last thing is, depending on when all the restrictions get lifted this year in the coming months, it could lead to a slow start, slow build up to getting back onto an even keel again. By the time people bring people out of furlough and get suppliers up to speed again. So that's just a heads up on what could happen in the first quarter of the new year. So happy to take any questions on any information in the report.
Thanks very much, Brian. I think we'll be saying for quite some time on where we are, and I think as long as we're doing all that we can, I think we'll be relatively relaxed about the need for flexibility there. Alan Valentine, question from yourself.
Thanks, Chair. Reference para 1.7, the ability to source labour by contractors as well as raw materials due to ongoing Brexit negotiations. Does this paragraph suggest that there's not enough qualified tradespeople in the labour market to service these contracts?
I don't think it says that. I think it says we just need to recognise that there may be challenges ahead that we just need to try and find ways round about. I mean, there was labour before COVID, and I assume it will still be here after. But material shortages, I would suggest, is maybe an area because material prices are increasing almost daily due to the lack of availability. I mean, PVC, timber, they've all went up, plaster, and shortage over the last few months as a result of probably more to do with COVID than Brexit, but the effect of Brexit is probably still there in the periphery. We need to just take advantage of going forward, but I don't envisage any problems with ability to source labour or materials, but we just have to recognise that there may be issues that we need to just overcome, or obstacles we just need to remove when we're delivering this programme.
Thanks very much, Brian. I think a crystal ball to see what the implications will be, but we know that when we get the bulk of the national supply of timber for Northern Europe, bringing them in, unless we can look at sustainable, closer to home sources, there may be challenges, and even the standards of some materials coming across the UK are closer. We just need to be mindful of that. So any implication at impact, I'm sure we'll come back to committee as soon as we are aware of it. I don't have any other. Can we approve the recommendations as set out on page 57, please?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving to 8 is a report that none of us like to see, but it's one that we get every year, and it's the former tenants arrears write-off for 2018. Stephen, can I come to you, please?
Hi, convener. Sorry, Greg's going to take this one.
My apologies, Greg. I'll come to you.
No problem. Thanks, convener. Morning, everyone. So this is the annual report that we take to committee every year to seek permission to write off housing rents from former tenants when we've deemed it uncollectible after all attempts at recovery. So it's worth noting we've highlighted in section 1 where the service has a full range of activities and methods to pursue rent arrears, from starting from early engagement with tenants who fall into arrears, and then support through income maximisation processes before they move to more formal arrangements for pursuing the debt. And as a result, what we've highlighted in paragraph 1.5 is that despite the reductions in rent collection rates in 2017-18 and 18-19, we recovered this to a degree in 19-20, where the service collected over 100% of rent raised because of its success in recovering historic debts. But even despite those efforts, the service still has a number of debts that have been deemed uncollectible. And that can be for a number of reasons, and we've highlighted in section 2.2 what those could be. So it could be, for instance, that the tenant has died, that they've moved on without leaving a forward an address and we can't actually locate them, or where it's become uneconomical to pursue. So the table in 2.3 provides a breakdown of the write-off reason, and then highlights the number of tenancies that it relates to and the average per each cause. And following feedback from previous committees, what I've also done is I've provided a table in paragraph 2.4 that gives a write-off, provides an analysis over previous years. What's worth highlighting at this stage is that it has increased this year. We're asking committee to write off over £3 million, which only represents about 2.5% of our total rent collected. But that's almost entirely down to the consequences of its transition to universal credit. And it's probably worth noting that because we've got things like the Universal Credit Assistance Fund, and we've got measures in place to support tenants through the income maximisation process, that we would expect in future years that will either stabilise or hopefully reduce, given the efforts of the service. So in terms of the report, what we're asking committee to do is note that through delegated powers, the head of Housing Solutions and the head of Financial Solutions have got delegated authority to write off £266,000 worth of debts under £500, and then to approve the write-off of those balances greater than £500, which totals just over £3.2 million. And then the third element is about writing off credit balances that have accrued in the rent account over the period of time. But again, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Greg. I've got a couple of questions coming in from members. Tommy Morgan, can I come to you first, please?
Thanks, Convener. Convener, as you said yourself there, it's a sad report to see this because included within it, without any names appearing, it's statistics, but it certainly includes some of the most marginalised individuals in society that just are in almost no man's land. And that's why we've got the unusual situation I need to ask on. And that is the peculiar trends in the figures of page 69 show that there's an assumption that evictions would be the highest cost to this. It's not, it's abandonment. So Greg's comments there is that we're trying to address this. So the humane side to me is saying, you know, these are individuals that need the most help. These are the casualties of welfare reform. But mentioning welfare reform, if Greg's prediction that this will settle itself out and seasonally adjust itself, it doesn't concur with what's happening in page section 2.4. Because since welfare reform kicked in, there has been a threefold increase in the amount of tenant arrears. So there's two sides of the report. There's the humane side that we've all got. We know these are the most marginalised and these are the victims of a system, an ideological system that is reform welfare. But we're also legally obliged to ask questions when, as we'll see in a later report, our finance officers are telling us that our HRA risk is going into a significant area. If this trajectory continues, it's sitting at 2.5% of the HRA budget just now. By the end of this decade, 5% of the HRA budget will be getting written off. Now, while you've got year-on-year increases in the HRA, the levels of rent, is that a sustainable situation, Greg? What is being done? I mean, as I said, the people there in the abandoned situation, anybody who knows that anybody's abandoned a tenancy knows that they've reached abandon all hope. The roof is closed in on them, the ceilings come down, the floors come up, and they've abandoned. What are we doing to individually identify them, not in a punitive way, but to address that? Because if the figures in 2.4 are anything to go by, we will just continually be getting this report coming up year on year, and it's going to eat more and more into the funding of our HRA, which we need to improve houses and build houses to accommodate homeless people. So what is being done there? Is Edinburgh listening? Is London listening? Greg says that within the report we're trying to address it. What are we doing to address it? Is there anything tangible? Or is there anything that's planned to try and resolve these, what should we say, exponential negative growths that are taking place?
Convener, I'm happy to come in and clarify that, answer that. Greg
Yes,
wants
please,
to come in
Stephen.
with anything else.
Sure, anytime, Stephen.
Councillor Morgan, the write-off figures, as you say, I mean, it's obviously a cause for concern. However, we feel as though it has peaked now because these figures are going back a couple of years ago in terms of the amount, and that's where the rent arrears actually peaked. So rent arrears figures current tenant rent arrears figures are sitting at £5 million just now, which is an unbelievable amount of money. However, it was £5 million at the start of the financial year as well. And again, that's testament to the stuff that the committee has approved in terms of the Rent Relief Fund, the UC Fund. Also, you'll recall going back 18 months ago, where committee also approved an additional 15 posts, which were for income maximisation and sustainability. So a lot of what's on this report has been reversed in that time. If you take into account the increase in rents last year and the fact that we're still at £5 million, another council actually contacted us last week because they've seen an increase in their rent arrears in the last year of 44%. Their rent arrears are actually up over £10 million and they have got 20,000 of their stock. So they've got significant lower proportion of stock than us, and their rent arrears figures are now higher. So the figures that we're presenting today of write-offs are about 2 and 3 years ago. So that's what Greg's saying, we feel as if it has peaked just now. And in further years, you will see that level of write-off. There's also different proportions of write-offs across councils. Every council's got different write-off policies as well. And actually, on an actual forum, I see councils actually writing off £5-6 million. We've over the years been one of the lowest because our policy's been quite strict in terms of what we write off. I want to also give the reassurance, although it's a write-off on paper, because again, when people come back, we will work with people and we will try and collect. And hence, you see that the figures that's on this, that we collected over 100% last year. and that's because we're collecting arrears from previous years. So we are working closely with people. We have put the resources in terms of abandonments. Abandonments were a concern. The level of abandoned houses are actually down this year. Now you could argue that's because of COVID and because evictions are not taking place and things like that. There's a lot of abandonments take place because of the threat of eviction. People just go up and decide before the court order to go. So it's a mixture of both, but we are putting lots of resources into maximising people's income, making sure that you'll be aware as well, the void let standard is so much better now. We decorate houses, we're making sure people are getting Scottish Welfare Fund grants, so people are getting carpets, they're getting white goods, they're getting furnitures and belongings. So we're finding the actual sustainability levels have improved in the last 18 months because of that. So I'd like to hope that in the coming annual report that we present to committee along this, you will see a difference in a reversal in the trends is what I hope just now.
Greg, anything to add to that comprehensive answer from Stephen?
Not a huge amount, other than just to reiterate that these write-offs relate to the 18-19 financial year, or before the 18-19 financial year. And it was during 1920 that we introduced the Universal Credit Assistance Fund and those posts that Stephen mentioned. So if you like, the action to try and address some of these issues was taken two years ago, really, by the committee and by the council, and its successive decisions around supporting the Universal Credit Assistance Fund and supporting the recruitment of those 15 posts that Stephen referred to. And it's now, I think it's now reached its peak, but again, it's still a watching brief, given what Stephen said about the arrear situation. It seems to have levelled off, but we just need to keep an eye on it as always.
Thanks for that. Convener, can I clarify right at the outset or at the end of this? I am asking these questions from a humane dimension. I'm not asking these from a punitive target blame, cultural blame. But I'm concerned. The answers that's been given has certainly clarified a lot of concerns that I did have, and I would keep my curious eye on the situation regarding once evictions have been lifted because of the COVID situation. That's any impact on abandonment, because we know ourselves. I'll say it once again: once a person's abandoned a tenancy, they are in a hole that it becomes very, very problematic to get out of. So I'm glad to hear that the department's keeping an eye on that, and we'll see those figures reflected in next year's report. Thanks very much, Convener.
Thanks very much, Councillor Morgan. What I would say is like this is why we talk about tenants' participation, we talk about tenants' engagement. This is exactly why having a ongoing working relationship with tenants is vital. It's about people having somebody that they trust, that they can go to say help, and not to let people accrue substantial arrears that they feel that they're drowning in debt. Early communication, that early intervention, that early support can help people sustain their tenancy, but actually maintain and improve their well-being, particularly their mental health and well-being. And the approach that we've taken to rents in the recent history, I think, has made a demonstrable difference in how we are supporting our tenants, so that they don't get to that level of arrears. I've said all along since I've been convener, it's about being firm, but it's been fair. We want to be a compassionate landlord, astute to the circumstances that our tenants are living in, and providing support where we can do so. Thanks for your question, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Valentine, I'll come to you next.
Thanks, Chair. Can I thank the officers for 2.4? It's the table there. We've requested that a couple of times and we've now got it as standard. And it does give, and as Tommy said earlier on, it shows us where the trends are going. So I'm happy with that, and that I take it will stay as part of this report. I'm interested in 2.2D, and the recovery is exhausted. All avenues of recovery have now been exhausted via our internal process and via the courts. And further recovery is considered not possible on that. How much do we spend? Is there a cut-off point where we say, right, that's enough, it's no longer viable to chase a debt? Is there a procedure that we get to, or is there a financial point that we get to then that it becomes no longer viable to chase a debt? Thanks.
Greg, can I come to yourself, please?
was hoping Stephen could provide the detail. So a lot of the debt recovery processes take place in the housing team, but I'm not aware of the specifics.
That's okay, Stephen. My apologies.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, anything over £250 at the beginning, Councillor Valentine. We will letter it. Everybody gets letters out, irrespective of the debt that's left. So everyone will be contacted and will be lettered. We then do a judgment at some point in terms of, once we speak to people, if someone's in on one of the benefits, for instance, then it becomes there's no reason or no need to, there's no purpose to actually go and pursue somebody that's on benefit, because the policy of the council ultimately, we wouldn't go and put them in further hardship, we wouldn't go and pursue that. If someone is working and has just decided that we do get people, unfortunately, who just decide deliberate non-payment, it does happen, and then they end up evicted or they end up abandoning their tenancy. So it depends on the circumstances in terms of the level of debt and actually the circumstances surrounding the person in debt. If someone is on a benefit, a legacy benefit, we will not pursue that, and that will actually be stopped at an early stage. If someone's working and they do have the finances, we would pursue that, but the cut-off is £250 and above to begin with.
Any supplementary, Alan?
Sorry, I was just going to add, convener, that we're not spending, in case this was asked previously, just for other people who maybe weren't on committee before. I think there was a thought that we were spending lots and lots of money in terms of sheriff officers' fees pursuing these debts. We're not. The debts are pursued within the service between myself and our financial colleagues. So it's actually an in-house thing that's done, and then a judgment. In terms of the categorisations that there, we've got further categories in terms of abandonment, the deceased, in terms of level of debt and the income coming in. So we do a financial assessment where we manage to engage with the person as well and determine at that point whether it's achievable to go and pursue the debt any further or not.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Councillor Valentine, any supplementary? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Burgess, Bob, I'll come to you now.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, just if I can concur with Councillor Morgan and Valentine, we've got a lot of worries and a lot of worried people obviously out there, but we really need to look at that whole situation and try and help as much as we can, obviously. But there's 2 points in the figures that I'd like to explain. Abandoned and no forwarding address. Where is the difference in one of those figures? And can I add, and just a wee extension to Alan Valentine's question, can we get some kind of figure on hours spent on chasing this debt?
I'm happy to answer that. In terms of abandoned, so the abandoned, we have a process. If someone actually just abandons the house, gets a tenancy, decides they go away and live elsewhere, there's a process the council go through in terms of the Housing Act where we serve a notice on someone, giving them 28 days. If they don't move back into the house, we will repossess the house. So there's actually a set criteria for what's an abandoned house. No forwarding address is when someone actually walks into an office and hands in a set of keys, and that happens regular as well. So they hand in a set of keys and they refuse to give us, so they actually do terminate the tenancy, but they terminate the tenancy themselves, hand in a set of keys, but refuse to give a forwarding address. That gives us real concerns and issues in terms of trying to track them for the future. And the only way we ultimately end up engaging with people in that situation is if they come back for a house at some point. So an abandonment is a legal process where someone has actually abandoned the house. The no forwarding address is when someone actually terminates their own tenancy but refuses to give us a forwarding address.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I hope that answers your question, Bob. Can I move on now to Alan Stubbs, please?
Thanks, Heather. It's in relation to the numbers, and I suppose specifically evictions. And following on from Tommy Morgan's point, the council, I know eviction is a last resort, but what is the next step after eviction for someone if you do successfully evict them for not paying their rent? I presume that the council still has a statutory obligation to house the people that you've just evicted. So are we evicting people and the cost that's involved with that to put them into a different house, or how does that work? There's quite large numbers overall on this table. If we take out deceased, and you know, I take it recovery exhausted doesn't necessarily mean that they've moved out of the house either. So you could take that out, but we're still talking, you know, a 4-figure number of tenancies in a calendar year or a financial year that are no longer in that house. Where is everybody going, and what does the council do to support them?
Stephen.
So overall, these figures are anyone who's terminated their tenancy in that period. So it could be people buy houses as well, people go out into the private sector. There's a whole lot of reason why people give up houses. People will, in terms of merging of households, people will give up the house to go and stay with someone else. The issue with evictions, you're quite right, Councillor Stubbs. The council, although we are a landlord, the council is also the statutory body in terms of homelessness. And this says, so 120 evictions in there. We evict somebody as the landlord because we've got the legal duty to collect the rent. But as I evict someone, then we also outline people's homelessness requirements and tell them what they can do. This is not just for council tenants, this is also for RSL tenants or private sector tenants. So anyone who's evicted for any form of rent arrears, whether it's in the council sector, the private sector, or even through mortgage default or whatever, the council is the statutory body, in terms of homelessness. So the council is the person who will take that homeless application, and we will arrange temporary accommodation. There's then an assessment of the homelessness. We need to require one of the homeless, which obviously they are if they've been evicted. But how did their homelessness come about? Are they intentionally homeless because they've deliberately failed to pay? Or are they unintentional? If they're unintentionally homeless, the council then have got the responsibility to find them secure accommodation. If they're intentionally homeless, the council still have a responsibility towards them to try and assist them to get accommodation, but we don't have the obligation to actually secure it for them. It's about advice and assistance. But the bottom line is, anybody evicted, then the council is the responsible body who requires to get them temporary accommodation, yes.
Heather, can I come back in on that? Thank you.
Yes,
I sympathise with the difficulty in trying to balance this that the service has. If somebody's refusing to pay their rent, I understand that eviction as a last resort has to be on the table. But how much time, money and effort is put into evicting someone to then rehome them? And even if they are classified as intentionally homeless for refusing to pay rent, which I think is what you're alluding to there, I don't think that I would be very comfortable with the idea that the council would wash their hands, or even just say, we'll give you a wee bit of assistance, but we're not going to give you a house. I don't think that I know that the council struggles with temporary accommodation. I know from experience that is the case, that it's not always available when it's required. But when we evict somebody from a property, how much is it costing, and how much time? And follow on from Bob's point, how many hours are spent by officers dealing with something to simply get to the stage where we have to find another house? And is there a different option available from actually going down the line of physically evicting someone?
Thanks, Alan.
Yep.
I'm sure Stephen will articulate. We do not want any form of revolving door where someone goes from one part of the service to another part of the service, potentially to another part of the same service to get their needs met. That's again why that tenants' engagement and support and intervention is critical. Stephen, please, I'll bring you back in.
Yeah, studies have been done over the years, Councillor Stubbs, and they reckon on average, if you evict somebody, it will cost up to between £15,000 and £20,000. The issue is if you don't do that, Stirling Council, a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, Stirling Council introduced a no eviction policy, and within 6 months of the no eviction policy, their rent arrears actually doubled. And it put major pressure on the housing revenue account, because as soon as they announced that there would be a no eviction policy, people then did decide not to pay. And when people decided not to pay, that had an impact in terms of their overall business plan and running services. And very quickly, they had to actually reverse that policy. But the policy here has always been about early intervention and about offering and assisting people as much as we can. Eviction has got to be a last resort and is always going to be a last resort. And the numbers are high at 120. However, we get 36,500 council tenancies. If you look at it as a proportion, it's actually a tiny number. Although it's a high number, it's a tiny proportion. And we at all times must put every help and assistance. But the council will always be the statutory body. So as a landlord, as I said, when we do evict, we will require to. But if you take away that as a tool, then you will find that rent arrears will absolutely rocket and it'll put pressure on other parts of the business.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Important dialogue around about this paper. The recommendations are on page 67. Can we note and agree those recommendations, colleagues?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. If we move on now to item 9, it's the Revenue Budget Monitoring reports. Greg, can I come to you, please? Paper A.
Thanks again, Convener. So all of these reports, the next 5 reports, are based on period 10, which takes us to early January. So this HRA revenue report, we're estimating at this stage an outturn underspend of around £8.4 million. And as I've described at previous committees, a big part of that underspend surplus is linked to the coronavirus pandemic, and that'll become a bit of a recurring theme over the next 5 reports because I'll be talking about it a lot. So because of the COVID pandemic and the restrictions on housing repairs activity to emergency and legislative work only through the height of the first lockdown restrictions, and then significantly during the recent lockdown restrictions, that's resulted in an anticipated underspend of just over £5 million on our repairs programme. Given the ongoing restrictions, there's a likelihood or there's a risk that underspend could continue to rise, but the service is continuing to liaise with its partners, principally Mears and Saltire, to ensure that as much work as possible can take place. Some of that repairs underspend has been offset by a couple of cost pressures within the service. We've mentioned earlier on about the ability for us to recover arrears. So while the rent arrears figure has kind of stabilised throughout the year, the additional asks in the current year in relation to support for Universal Credit Assistance Fund and the Rent Hardship Fund have created some additional costs, which is partially offsetting that repairs position. If we take COVID out of the equation, the service would have an underlying underspend of around £4.7 million. And that's largely attributable to the ambition funding. So really what we've got is we've got that ambition funding in advance of need. And given the delays that we've got in the capital programme delivery as a result of COVID, which we'll go on and talk about in future reports, that's the cause of that underspend. And that'll be carried, an element of that will be carried forward to support ongoing investment in our ambition programme. But in terms of the overall variance that we've got in the current financial year, members of the committee will recall that at Council in December, when we set our HRA revenue budget for 21-22, we agreed to utilise £7.5 million of that surplus to support 3 priorities. So we'd agreed to set aside £2.5 million to support or continue to support the Universal Credit Assistance Fund and Rent Hardship Fund. We set aside £2.5 million to provide an enhanced programme in capital for energy efficiency measures to help tackle fuel poverty. And we set aside £2.5 million because at that point in time, the amount of uncertainty we had around the repairs programme, we were a bit concerned that there might be a peak in demand for repairs. So setting aside £2.5 million in the budget will help us manage that demand throughout the next financial year. The last thing I'll say in the report is that the service is projected to achieve 100% of its savings targets for the year, and that's despite the challenges that have been caused by the pandemic. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Greg. I don't have any questions in the chat bar at this time. No one is indicating that they want in. It's a comprehensive report, and again, we'll be astute to needing to be flexible regarding the implications of COVID in the short and the medium term. The recommendations are to note this report. Can we agree that, colleagues?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to report B, please, which is the Enterprise and Communities Monitoring Report for the trading?
Thanks again, Convener. So this is the trading report. I've said before that the trading operations for the council include things like cleaning, catering, and CCTV provision. We had the report earlier on in the committee cycle. So the only significant offset and variances we've got are linked to the transfer of staff to the Police Scotland's new national cleaning contract. And that's resulting in an underspend in employee costs because the staff have transferred, and it's fully offset by an under recovery in income. So at this stage in the financial year, we're projected to meet our budgeted surplus, and there's no real significant concerns around the COVID pressures in this area of the business. Again, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, colleagues? I'm not seeing any in the chat bar at this time. We're asked to note the financial position and the recommendations on page 79. Can we do that, colleagues? Thank you very much. Can we move on to paper C, the Enterprise and Communities Revenue Monitoring Non-Trading paper, please, Greg? Paper C.
Yeah, thanks again, Convener. So this is the rest of the Enterprise and Community Service out with HRA. So at this stage in the financial year, we're anticipating an out turnover spend of just over £8 million. And that has arisen, again, because of COVID. So within the report, we're highlighting COVID cost pressures of around £11.6 million. And that's been offset by, partially offset by about £3.6 million worth of service management action linked to the Council's agreement to curtail non-essential expenditure. So in relation to the COVID costs within the service, the biggest element is linked to loss of income because of the lockdown restrictions and the continuing lockdown restrictions. And that's had an impact over the year on areas like planning and building standards income, on catering within schools, and on special uplifts. We continue to have risks associated with them because of the uncertainty of the model of the recovery and how the recovery might work. But we're continuing to monitor that throughout the remainder of the year. We've also had a number of increased costs as a result of COVID, and that's in relation to areas that will be no surprise to elected members that have been involved in this. So areas like ensuring that we've got appropriate hygiene measures in place across the Council's estate. We've had increased staffing requirements linked to the fleet operations across the Council in relation to putting additional cleaning hours in schools, and the staffing impact of staff in our hubs throughout the summer holiday period, and then even just the more recent school holiday period. We've also had additional fleet costs just because we've had to maintain social distancing. And we've had things like, because the amount of people that are working from home, significant increases in household waste costs. Our tonnage, since people moved to large-scale working from home, has started to increase. And because of the ongoing restrictions, it's not started to reduce again. So some of those things have been offset. We've had some additional income coming directly to the service. And we've also had additional income because we've been able to apply in some instances for the coronavirus job retention scheme. And we've had areas where, so if we're not providing school meals, we've got school meal food costs reduced. So on the non-COVID side, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a £3.6 million underspend. Now, given the pressure that Enterprise and Communities has been under throughout this financial year, it's actually quite a remarkable position to be able to contribute that, and that's been a direct result of all the heads of service and the management team throughout Enterprise and Communities taking the position of non-essential expenditure, non-essential recruitment seriously because of the uncertainties we had about 9 months ago around about the Council's overall financial position. But just on that, on a corporate level, members will be aware that because of the accounting flexibilities and additional funding that we're receiving from the Scottish Government, we are now more hopeful that we'll have sufficient scope in the current year to manage the deficit and manage the COVID costs. Last thing I'll highlight before opening up to questions is just about the services savings in year. So in year, despite the challenges that have been caused by COVID, we've achieved 83% of our savings in full in this financial year. And the biggest elements, or almost all of the non-achievement, has been linked to delays and the savings impacted by COVID. And again, that's a testament to the proactive nature that the service has taken in achieving its savings targets. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Greg, for that comprehensive report. I don't see any questions in the chat bar at the moment. Does anybody need in on this item? No, the recommendations are on page 85 and it's to note the financial position of the report. Can we note that report, colleagues? Thank you very much. Can I move on to item 10A? It's the HRA Capital Monitoring Report, and it's back to yourself, Greg.
Yeah, thanks again, convener. So to continue the COVID theme, so HRA Capital Monitoring are projecting for the mainstream programme an underspend of £28.7 million in the current financial year. And similar to what I presented earlier in relation to the repairs programme, that is entirely down to the ability of the service and its contractors to actually get work done throughout the year because of the lockdown restrictions, the continuing restrictions. But while there's an underspend in the current year, you'll have heard Brian mention earlier in approving the capital budget for next year and an update in the next 5 years, that the intention will be that we catch up over a period of time. So while we've got delays in the current financial year, it's not that these works aren't going to take place, it's that the phasing of them, the profile of them will change. And similarly for the new supply and buyback programmes, we're anticipating underspends in the current financial year. For the new supply programme, there's really two issues at play, and it's partly Scottish Water, which we've rehearsed a few times at committees, and we've discussed that about the ongoing impact of Scottish Water requirements. But we've also had an underspend associated with the ability of contractors to get works completed because of the ongoing COVID restrictions. And the same is true for the buyback scheme, where we anticipate that instead of getting 130, 140 properties back into our stock that we would normally get in any given year, at the current time we're anticipating we'll get about 100 in this financial year. And again, it's linked to the lockdown restrictions that we faced earlier on in the financial year. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Greg. I don't have any questions in the chat bar at this time. I'm not seeing anybody indicating that they want in. The recommendations are on page 9.
Yeah,
Hello.
Sorry. As you know, I'm at the foundation level class here. That's my things went down. Can I ask a question? Can I ask
Of
a
course
question
you
on
can.
this report? Thanks, convener. It's Greg will be glad to hear it's nothing to do with the new build or buyback, but it is on the page 102, the overall budget monitoring programme and the Housing Revenue Capital programme. Greg, understandably so, has made reference a couple of times to COVID backlogs, and that's the reality of what we're living in here. But bringing together comments that have been made by other council colleagues such as Alan Valentine, Alan Stubbs, in relation to tower strategy, I noticed that in this page, Greg, that the tower strategy funding there is sitting with a balance over £4 million. Presumably, that's not all strategies, but Meriston and the Coatbridge ones will fit in there somewhere. By pure coincidence, Heather, your leaflet came in here with your Joe Biden jacket. The Tenants News came in, and there's an article in it, came in during this meeting, that's why I take off screen, about improving fire safety in towers. I notice it in there. Now, bringing together the serious points here of what's been mentioned about safety in towers, the Grenfell we all know about, we know that's probably more problematic in England than it is up here. Is it still the situation that our stock doesn't fall into that category? It's in a relatively safer category. But also bringing in Alan Valentine's second point. If we're sitting here with a backlog of COVID works, we put it that way, COVID backlog, if there's going to be a shortfall in certain trades once we reach post-COVID, there's going to be an acceleration, and it's going to be a buyer's market, so to speak. So are we sitting now with that money in the bank, so to speak? Would it not be wise to sit and look at the possibility of awarding contracts at this particular stage, rather than at a later period when labour costs are at a premium, and many of these projects are done by specialist firms, where we could probably be more financially prudent to give the contracts now, and it's then awarded, rather than sitting waiting when there's a potential labour shortage, and because of a labour shortage, inevitably we're going to get less investment because costs will be higher. That's not to cut the price of labour by any matter of means, it's to see a way through the potential backlog and potentially get better economies, bigger bang for our buck, so to speak, while not undermining the safety factor in the example of, for example, tower strategies.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Thank you very much, Councillor Morgan. My understanding is we're carrying on to let contracts as we need to let them, and delays are being considered as part of that process, with mitigation factors being put into those contracts. But I'm sure Brian or Greg or another will be able to fully articulate those. Greg, are you answering this, or do you need one of your colleagues to to come forward.
I think Brian's looking to come in, convener.
Brian, in you come.
So, in answer to your question, Councillor Morgan, the two lines on the budget is tower strategy and tower upgrades. The tower strategy, you rightly point out, is about the safety of the doors and the fire stopping. That contract was already awarded. Mears were doing that work. If you recall, we've done that through direct award some time ago, about a year, just over a year ago, or maybe longer. The programme for that was supposed to finish in this financial year at the end of March. However, COVID's delayed that, and we think it will be done hopefully by the end of the summer. So therefore, to answer your question, the money is there, it's available, the budget's been identified, and the work will continue as soon as the restrictions are lifted. And in terms of tower upgrade, similarly, that's the projects that Councillor Stubbs was mentioning earlier in the towers and Coatbridge. Again, those contracts have been awarded, and that work will continue to the end of the year, and the budgets have been identified. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks for those clarifications, convener. Much appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's important that we're not just sitting with money in the bank and just waiting to see what happens. We're carrying on to do what we can, where we can, so that our tenants are not put in any form of detriment, certainly never when it's to do with safety. The recommendations are on page 90, page is it 97, 98? No. 5. I'll get my numbers right. Yeah, it was like bingo there. My apologies, colleagues. Can we note the position, colleagues? Sorry, can we note the position, the recommendations on page 105, colleagues? Thank you very much. Can we move on to the next report, please, Greg? Is it B? We've just done B, haven't we, for you?
We've done 10A. That's just the next one's 10A.
Well, my apologies. Can I ask us to note? That's what happens when I shuffle paper and I've got a wee desk compared to what I'm used to using in the chamber. My apologies, colleagues. So we're noting the recommendations on page 97 for agenda item 10A. Can we agree those as is articulated? And we'll move on. Thank you. And we'll move on now to 10B, which is a capital monitoring report for enterprise and communities. Greg.
Yeah, thanks, convener. So this is a report for the rest of the service out with the HRA element. And I'll remind committee that what we did last year, because of the uncertainty about COVID funding and COVID costs, the council made a decision through the strategic capital delivery group to curtail all non-essential expenditure. And through the capital delivery group, we did a review of the capital programme in July. Excuse me. Pardon me. That review identified the programmes that were legally committed, essential and deliverable in the current financial year. And thereafter, the SCDG agreed to realign the programme to that effect. However, notwithstanding all of that, the service is forecasting an underspend towards the year end. And that again is linked to largely COVID delays. The one biggest element of that is attributable to a delay in a planned purchase of land linked to the schools and centres modernisation programme. And the report highlights that given the nature of a land purchase, you're kind of at the mercy of solicitors and the market. So that process we now think will be finalised in the new financial year. So it's not, again, like the funding's not going to disappear. We'll carry that forward and ensure that that's available for that purpose in the new year. Throughout the rest of the report, we've got a number of largely offsetting variances across the different divisions within the service, particularly within asset and procurement solutions. And that's linked to the service's proactive approach in managing the programme delivery, which is really what the SCDG was set up for. So where something slipped, for whatever reason, linked to COVID or linked to the contractor's ability to get work completed, we've had an offset and acceleration of other works to maintain basically the momentum in the programme as we try and recover from COVID. But other than that, there's nothing else really to update, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Greg. Comprehensive report again, colleagues. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. To ask the question. Nobody's indicating. The recommendations, colleagues, on page 105. Can we approve the recommendation? Moving on 9 to 11A, and these are contracts for approval. Greg, you're down for the first, I think, 11A. Is that yourself? No, Stephen.
No, convener, that's myself.
Stephen, my apologies.
Okay, this is the measure term contract for roof and render. Committee will note The tender is for £12 million approximately per year. It's a £60 million contract over a 5-year duration. The contract will continue strategic planning of the service to continue to invest in our stock, builds on the presentation from Cameron earlier in terms of homes fit for the future. And happy to take any. You'll see, sorry, the contract is initially for 2 years, with the 3 years at 12 months extension, taking it to the 5 years. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. The report's before us. Councillor Valentine, can I come to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. One is on Lot 2, page 118, Lot 2. The proposed contractor for Lot 2 is working towards Scottish Living Wage accreditation and is a small medium enterprise. Now, I was under the impression that when we were offering contracts, this contract is now, I'm led to believe, has been passed, or are we passing it today? What I want to know is, when will this company work towards get to Scottish Living Wage accreditation? Because I'm under the impression that we do not give out contracts to companies who do not meet that. And then a general point, I'm not sure if this is the right forum for this, so Heather, if I'm going a wee bit wobbly on this, you're welcome to cut me off. It's regarding contract tendering and the community benefit initiatives included in them. And what I'm asking here is, do we put the community benefits in a list and ask companies to tick, boxes where, oh, I can do that community asset, I can do that community benefit rather, or do we wait till the companies themselves offer community benefits within the contract? And within contracts themselves, and again, this might be for another forum, Heather, but why is there such a big difference in quality price ratios for different contracts placed within the council? If any of those are not within our remit, Heather, you're welcome to tell me off for it. Thanks.
No, I mean, I think it's legitimate questions to be asked, Alan, and if this is not the forum, we'll certainly get the information from the forum that is correct to do so. Ultimately, it is about procurement guidance, and respond to the questions from Councillor Valentine, please.
So in the first one, the contract today is for approval. It's not been approved, so it is for approval. We will make sure, as you said, that the successful for Lot 2 that they are, that they're not just working towards, but when they actually take up the contract, that they will be actually paying the Scottish Living Wage. So we will ensure that happens. The second part, in terms of community benefits, the community benefits is part of the overall assessment of the quality. So that's part of the actual tender that someone puts in, and they tell us what they will provide. So there isn't a set checklist where we say you must do A, B, and C in terms of like apprentices or whatever. That's part of the overall individual tender that each person will put in, and it's appropriately scored on the basis of what they're putting in, and that's part of the overall assessment, Councillor Valentine. The third part, in terms of the price ratio to quality, I'm going to actually plead third on that one and pass it to Brian.
Thanks, Stephen. The reason for different score is the different lots have different criteria in them. So some companies you will see that some companies maybe had the same scoring for the quality because they submitted the same quality submission for all 3 lots, but some changed it depending on the requirements of each lot. So that's why it can show variances as well, Councillor. Hope that answers your question.
I hope that answers your question, Alan. Anything else that you want to ask that cover?
Stephen's answer there is really good, because we all go through this contract part in all our committees, and it's been interesting to hear that it's the contractors who are bidding for them. We don't offer them a checklist. It's the contractor that's bidding for them says, right, okay, we're bidding for this contract, here's the finances, however, here's what else we're going to do. And I thank Stephen for that answer, because that thing's been bothering me for quite a while.
And what I would say, Alan, though, is that, see, once they say they're going to do it, they're then evaluated against the contract for it. So if you state it, you claim it, you've got to do it. It's not something that can just fall off as non-essential. Once you say you're doing it, it is provided as part of the contract, and they're measured against that in the monitoring of progress going forward. Sorry, I cut you off there, Alan. Come back in.
It's all right. Funnily enough, you may have answered my next question on 11B just with that statement, Heather. But on Brian's point, I'm not specific to the housing agenda. I was in adult health and social care yesterday, and there was a tender document there that was 90% quality at 10% price, and that's why I wasn't sure whether this was proper to this committee. I think I'll maybe have to ask that question, say at a full council meeting, because I need to understand why quality and price ratios are different for different contracts within the council, not within housing specifically. Thanks anyway.
Alan, I think it is right that you asked that. Another, based on what's in the contract, depends on what the split is, whether it be price, quality, or other. So I think it is appropriate that you ask that specific to the contract that's being let, and I'm sure procurement colleagues will be happy to give you further information on it. Councillor Tom Johnson, I have you on the list.
Thanks, convener. It's just a follow-up. Alan Valentine was asking, as I understand it, the company will pay the Scottish living wage for that particular contract, but that doesn't mean to say they're on a day-to-day basis for all their workers for all their general contracts. It's only on that specific contract they'll pay the Scottish living wage. And when they say they're working towards it, therefore, what does that actually mean? Thanks.
Well, we've certainly spoken other fora of the council, whether or not this one that is council we actively encourage small and medium enterprises to pursue the living wage, because it has got many positive dividends to them as a company, not just in the procurement of contracts. So really that would be for that company or those companies to articulate in my view. And while of course we would hope that a company, when they adopt the living wage, they adopt it for all contracts, again that's down to that company to decide as they go forward. And the team that we have through economic development who support people to recognise and engage with the accreditation will help people to fully understand the positive implications of that. I hope that assists you there. Councillor Morgan, can I come to you please?
Thanks, convener. It's just a brief comment in support of what Alan had said there. We discussed this in some detail at the Adult Health and Social Care Committee yesterday. And as you know, there's a figure of £820 million over 10 years going towards firms for SDS, self-directed support. But Alan's got an excellent point here. We know as members we don't get involved in procurement. But when you do one day, on the Tuesday of this week, sit in one committee and see a plethora, as there is, of conditions written into contracts. Some of them yesterday were excellent. I think Alan will concur with that. And they're not mentioned in these ones. The only condition is if they're over $500,000, community benefits, what they should be included. And then they're talking about things that these contracts aren't. Diverse workforce, disadvantaged young people. Those are areas that we should be encouraging anybody that we're giving a contract to be looking at, to be included in that contract. I know that you're saying, convener, and you're keeping us right, and rightly so. We're not getting involved in procurement here. But the inconsistency, and when one day of the week, and exactly one day, you see all these criteria that we want to see, presumably positive discrimination in those areas when it comes to spending public money, and in other contracts follow within a space of a day, much more, magnitude of expenditure, and are only given, in some cases, paltry conditions to community benefits. I think, as you've said, it has to be raised somewhere, not a service committee. It has to be raised somewhere that we get consistency in our procurement. And if there are reasons why there is a differential, it should be explained in the report to the relevant committee, either as you and Alan have referred to, at full council or at the policy and strategy.
Please be reassured that there is that we've been involved in some excellent best practice on community benefit evolution. But I'll ask Robert to come in here, because I think he'll provide that overarching response and hopefully give members comfort that we are taking an all council approach to community benefits. Robert, can I ask you to come in, please?
Thanks, convener. Just to pick up on Councillor Morgan's point there, we do review the contract standing orders annually, and it goes to policy and strategy, and that's exactly the place where these issues should be aired and should be covered in the report. But Graham Proudfoot has presented reports previously to do in particular with the living wage. We cannot in law specify the living wage. Can specify the minimum wage, that's a legal requirement, but not the living wage. But we do, just so that Councillor Valentine and Councillor Morgan are aware, and we do encourage, we do advise anyone who's procuring service, who we are procuring services from, that the council encourages a living wage and encourages a whole range of community benefits. But as Stephen outlined at the beginning, that then becomes part of the commercial evaluation, because some may offer more than others and they would get scored higher because they're offering more than others, and it becomes part of that evaluation process. So we do not specify, but we do evaluate what they put in, and those who bid for public sector contracts now are very, very aware that community benefits is becoming a greater part of that evaluation as we move forward. But in terms of the living wage as opposed to the minimum wage, by law we can't specify that as a condition of a contract. In terms of, well, I'll say European regulations, but they're still in law at the moment. If that changes legislatively, I'll say that legally. If that changes legally, we will obviously reflect that in our contract standing orders. Thanks very much. I'll go and untie my tongue now.
Thanks very much, Robert. Alan Stubbs, can I ask you to come in, please?
Thanks, Heather. Just on that point that Robert's made, and I wasn't actually aware that was the case. If the issue that we have, in my understanding of living wage accreditation, is that if the council was to appoint a contractor that wasn't accredited, or certainly wasn't doing the work on behalf of the council and paying living wage, then the council's own accreditation would be at risk as a living wage employer. So it's quite surprising to hear that, and I presume that it's, although obviously if it can't be put in, I'm assuming so far it's not an issue that's raised its head. But what, and I suppose for future reference, what power do councillors have? I mean, if we've got a recommendation to say that this is the one that scored the highest, but it's not living wage employer, would councillors put themselves in a legal predicament by saying, no, we're taking the second option then because they are a living wage employer? I wouldn't like the council to put its own accreditation at risk.
And I think that Robert, we'll come to you to respond on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. This is about us contracting services, and our accreditation is protected if we comply with procurement regulations, which we do absolutely to the letter, and we're audited on it, and every time we're audited through Scotland Excel in terms of procurement framework, our score is now within the top quartile for Scotland. So we comply, Councillor Stubbs, and we wouldn't want to put the council's accreditation at risk. But in terms of procurement, we're obliged to follow those procurement rules. So this is just a criteria, and the living wage becomes part of the community benefits rather than a requirement of our tender. And you'll see there that they're working towards it, and Stephen's given the feedback that he's given in terms of the work that they're going to do for us for this particular contract. Thank you.
Heather, can I just ask a quick question on that then, just as a follow-up, please? Can I just clarify then that the contract that we're talking about, there's obviously three lots here. The second one is the one that's working towards. Can I just clarify that those employees of that firm that are going to be doing the work on behalf of the council will be paid at least the Scottish living wage?
Convener, yeah, I can clarify that, Councillor Stubbs. As I think we've said earlier, Councillor Johnson had alluded to it, as a company, they are working towards, as a company, moving to the living wage. For this contract, they will be paying a living wage.
I hope that helps to clarify. So there are certain things that we can't make people do, but we can certainly warmly suggest that they do, and I think that's the approach. As I say, the council's done a lot of work about explaining and defining what community benefit is to help those understand, and organisations like the Supplier Development Programme and others help people bid better for public sector contracts to help them understand what they could and should be doing to put them in an attractive position. So hopefully that will help there. We have got recommendations outlined in pages 115 for this. Can I ask those to be approved?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving on to report B. Stephen, yourself.
Thanks again, convener. 11B is the tenants' home contents insurance. This contract was originally awarded in 2016 and was due out for tender. Because of delays in terms of COVID-19, we're asking committee today to approve the modification for 1 year of the contract, and we will start the tender process for a new contractor, or obviously this contractor if they win it next year. But there's just a wee bit of clarification I want to give today, because it's stated in implications financial impact, £567,000. I just want to clarify to the committee, this contract doesn't actually cost us anything. The council got a small commission actually on this. This is premiums that will be paid. So this is additional £500,000 that will be paid to the insurance company. But these premiums are paid by tenants. So it's a low cost home tenants content insurance. On average, about 70 pence a week people pay. So it was a contract that was negotiated 5 years ago on behalf of our tenants to offer them a low cost home contents insurance. It's actually a kind of the company tells us actually it's a loss making because of the number of claims they actually receive. So they struggle each year to break even. But I just want to clarify to committee that it's not an additional £500,000 that the council are paying out of the housing revenue account. It's not. This is premiums we collect from tenants and pass on.
I suppose that's about the strength of collective bargaining and a benefit that we give to our tenants by doing that. Are there any questions, colleagues? I'm not seeing any in the chat bar. If not, can we approve the recommendation on page 129?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving on to paper 11C, it's page 133. Brian, yourself?
Thanks, convener. This report, members will recall last May we brought a report to committee to extend the central heating contract for Saltire by a further year to align with the Enterprise Strategic Partnership contract. So this is just seeking approval as requested last May to bring a paper to future committees for approval, and the paper's there for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat bar for this report. So colleagues, the recommendations are on page 133. Can we approve those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving on to page 145. These are contracts for noting. There are two that are here for noting, colleagues. I'd be happy to note both of those reports as written.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Chair, I don't mean to be rude, but yeah,
sorry,
I
I've just jumped an item. My sincere apologies. That's what happens when you turn a page. Thank you, Councillor Valentine. We both noticed that at the same time. Brian, my apologies. I missed out the proposed extension to housing and corporate property repairs and maintenance contract. Can we come to that, please?
Thanks, convener. That similar situation. That was the Mears extension we took to committee last May. Again, we're bringing this forward for approval to extend by a further year to line and to bring it in line with the Enterprise Strategic Partnership contract. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this contract, colleagues? The recommendations are on page 139. Can we approve those? Thank you very much. I will 12A. I'll come back to because I don't want to rush colleagues through that. 12A is the new supply procurement design municipal buildings. Can I have who's taking this report? Is it Pamela? Because I have a question. Yep. Pam, yourself. If you could take the report and then I'll come to questions.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, the committee will recall back in May last year, they approved the proposals to move forward with developing detailed design proposals for the municipal buildings to convert that into housing and to include that as part of the new supply programme. So this report is for noting. This report highlights that we've now appointed the design team that will take the project forward through detailed design and also management of the work. The only change to what had been previously highlighted or indicated to committee is that we're now proposing that we would retain the former council chamber and the larger committee rooms that we share within the building, and it's proposed that we would retain them as office touchdown type space for council staff. So the arrangements or the design proposals will take account of those changes. So happy to take any questions on the report.
Thanks very much, Pam. I appreciate that. Alan Stubbs, can I come to you, please?
Thanks, Heather. It's always welcome to hear. I mean, colleagues will know that I'm opposed to the idea of taking this building out of public use, even if it is for housing.
Excuse me, colleagues, can I ask you to put, if you're not actively speaking, can I ask you to put your mic on mute? I'm hearing very heavy typing noise and I want colleagues to be able to hear Councillor Stubbs's question. Thank you.
Hang on. 5 days to the schools go back, for certainly for my two. Anyway, the issue that I have is that there's obviously legal opinion that what the original plans were for this building are not going to be possible, and I'm concerned that we're going to be chucking over £1 million at a project that might not be legal. 4.2.1 refers to the legal opinion, given that this site is for common good. It was gifted to the town, to the borough of Coatbridge, for the people, for the common good. And there's been various projects like, and I know that the usual way that the council would, and I don't want to say get round these clauses, but I don't mean that in the way that it sounds, but the usual way of dealing with that is, for instance, the Carnegie Library, what they did was build another library, and that allowed the Carnegie Library to be used for other purposes. But there's no such proposal here. We have what was gifted as a town hall is going to be changed into use for housing, whether it be social or otherwise. And 4.4, the second sentence in that is the key one for this whole report. The members really should have alarm bells ringing, and it's that the money that we spend at the moment as a council might just be wasted if they can't resolve the title issues. We really should have that resolved before we spend any more money on this project. And I suspect that the decision to free up the council chamber and the committee rooms is an attempt to deal with those title issues, so that at least part of the building are still technically for the common good. I would suggest, I mean, first things first, it would be useful, I think, for members to see that legal advice. We might not quite, I find myself more and more often starting sentences with I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure that the legal advice could be given to the members of this committee, or all members of the council, or local members, however we do it, with some sort of guidance and interpretation, I suppose, from the legal team at the council, to let us see before we agree for the council to be spending 7 figures and more on a project that might never go ahead, only for us to have to go back to the drawing board. I'd be interested. I might come back in after I hear a response, particularly to the question on the legal advice and whether or not we can see that, and whether the officers would consider, because I know that this is for noting and not for approving. And there's some substantial changes to what was approved, and so maybe we could clarify why we're not back at the approval stage as well.
Thanks, Alan.
Heather, if I can.
Sure, I'll give you opportunity for supplementary once you've had an answer to this initial question. Pamela, can you respond to Councillor Stubbs?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in terms of the approval was given in May to proceed to work up the detailed design proposals. Obviously, previously we'd done the feasibility study, and that was looking at the various options for the use of the building, and was considered that the building was feasible to convert. We also reported to committee at that time in terms of the legal opinion. It was obviously a fact in terms of the common good, but there is a process to be gone through. So obviously, we you know, there will be a consultation in terms of the legal process. There's to be a public consultation. So it's changing the use of the building. It's not saying that it's no longer going to be common good. It's just it's changing. You know what the original kind of common good use was, and there's a process to be gone through. So there will be a public consultation as part of that process. In terms of the this commission, I think it details it in the report. This is a staged process, so it's in no way are we committing that we will spend £1 million on fees. The total commission is basically in stages. So at the end of any stage, each and every stage, there is obviously the option to stop at that point. So it is a bit chicken and egg though, because we obviously do need to do more, you know, detailed design proposals. There needs to be obviously a consultation with HES in terms of the listed nature of it. So we need to work up those proposals to a certain stage in order to demonstrate that you know, what we're doing is appropriate and is feasible. So as I say, that's it's not we're not committed to spending the full commission at this stage. And in terms of the common good, then I think I can certainly ask legal. We can do a briefing note if that would be helpful for members on what that process is and what the stages would be in that. I can arrange for that to be circulated.
Thanks, Pam. That's appreciated. Alan, I'm anticipating a supplementary.
Yes, thanks, Heather. I mean, I appreciate that answer. I'm glad to hear there's going to be a public consultation. What I hope doesn't happen though is if there's a massive outpouring of opposition from local people to this building being used for something other than what it was in. I mean, I think it's stretching its offices at the moment. It was the town hall. It was the Monklands District Council headquarters. It's been used for various things, but when you go to housing, that's it. Nobody can go in at the moment. Any member of the public can go in. They might only get as far as the front desk, but they can go into what used to be Coatbridge's town hall. But my only real supplementary is on the point of the legal advice. What I wasn't asking for was a briefing about the process. I was asking for the legal advice and some sort of interpretation, because I know that QC advice can quite often be in what appears to be a different language to what everybody usually speaks. I was looking for that legal advice and a kind of idiot's guide for myself and others, so that we can see what the advice actually is and what it means, and whether or not we as members of this committee or wider members of the council agree with continuing to spend money on something that a lawyer, a QC, has advised will never be possible.
Pamela, can I come back to yourself?
Well, obviously that's not the advice we've received, but yeah, that's what I meant. We can put that into a briefing note if that'd be helpful. I'll speak to legal about that.
So make a request for the legal information to be circulated to committee and local members for their information. We are able to do that, and we'll take that as an action note from this committee. We have other questions. I have Councillor Jones. Can I come to you next, and then I'll come to Councillor McNeill.
Thanks, Convener. I've got two questions. One, who gifted Kildonan Street to the people of Coatbridge? And the second question is at 4.1.1 about the funding. It seems to be three elements to 1,050,000. Could I get the breakdown of the three elements? One is a grant support from the Scottish Government, and it starts off the funding met from the housing revenue account budgets, and a contribution from composite capital programme budgets and the Scottish Government. Could I get the three figures there, please?
Pamela.
Who donated the building? Or pass it to me if you don't have it.
I don't know who donated the building, so I would need to find that out. In terms of the financial...
Anybody local, no?
Tom, while that's a really interesting question to ask, I think it's a topic for out with this committee, and we can get that information. Figures that you've requested, Pam, do you have that?
We don't have the exact breakdown, because obviously the cost will still need to be, the detail of the cost is still to be worked out. The grant is obviously the grant we get from the Scottish Government. So currently that's £59,000 a unit. We would obviously be arguing or seeking maybe to get an increased grant because of the complexities of this project and the costs involved with that. But that's not guaranteed. So the balance would be met for the housing from the HRA in the usual way as it is for the rest of the programme. I think we did report to the committee the last time. So the total estimated cost for the 49 units was 11 million, which included a contingency and risk allocation within that. So that's the sort of the working budget at the moment, and that's obviously something that is why we're now moving to the more detailed design stage, and that will then be worked through as part of that. The contribution from general services obviously relates to whatever proportion of the overall costs relates to the use of the chamber, etc., for the office space. Clearly, if we're retaining them broadly as they are, there may not be significant costs associated with that, but we'll need to work out an apportionment of costs between what relates to the housing and the conversion and what relates to the office space, and the cost will be apportioned accordingly.
Thanks very much, Pamela. And I think it's worth noting that 2/3 of the cost of every unit built in North Lanarkshire is met by HRA resource, and so 1/3 government, 2/3 local government for each unit. Tom, I see you want a supplementary.
Yes, because of interference there, I couldn't quite catch what you said about trying to find out who donated the building.
Yes, we said we would commit to doing that at a late out with committee, Tom.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Logue, I see that you've got a comment to make, and then I'll come back to Councillor McNeill. Councillor Logue.
Yeah, in terms of the buildings being Coatbridge Town Hall, that stopped in mid-1960s when it was burnt down, and then there was an extension to the offices there. I think it's important to recognise that if COVID never happened, we'd still be in this situation just now. Because prior to COVID, we'd already agreed that that building was surplus to requirements because of our mobile working policy. And that was a very clear determination and a clear instruction from the council that it should move on for housing. And that is what has been invoked here. Pamela is absolutely right that in May 20, we agreed that the officers should go away and work up details. And what's in front of us today is the report with those details. Pamela is also right in pointing out that it's now a staged process, that we take it stage by stage. We're not committing that sum at this present time, but it is important that we start moving forward, because the question that members have got to ask themselves, if we do not turn that into housing, then what is the function of that building? Because it will not go back to being an office building. And what do members want then? Do they want it boarded up? Do they want it demolished? And I think it's important to recognise it is an iconic building, and we want that building to stay in Coatbridge. There is an acceptable alternative use to that building, and that's been highlighted in previous reports. And all we have done subsequent to those reports is start to build up the case for moving on. And this is a noting stage to let us go to the next stage for a further report back. And the issues that Tom Johnson and Alan Stubbs raised about who donated it, what are the limitations in that building, what are the legal implications of not adhering to a common good donation. All that will be clearly clarified in the next report which comes up. But I think the recommendation today is absolutely apposite. We should note it and allow the officers to go on, work up the details and come back to a subsequent meeting of this committee.
Thanks for your comment, Councillor Logan. I appreciate it. Councillor McNeill.
Thanks, Chair. It was interesting to hear the question about asking to see the legal advice, which I fully support. And it was also interesting to hear the reassurance from the staff member that unlike Edinburgh, they have got the legal advice in place and they're going with it immediately. So that's good to hear. I'd also like to suggest to my colleagues here that I hope you'll agree with me that social housing is exactly in the common good and it's a very fitting purpose for this building. So I sincerely hope that we manage to progress this and provide much needed council accommodation in Coatbridge.
Thanks very much, Councillor McNeill. I appreciate your input. Colleagues, we have the report before us. The recommendation is to note, and it's on page 145. Can we do that, please?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving on to contracts for noting B, which is Home's first flexible contract, support contract. It's a homologation report, colleagues, and the information is there before you. Can we agree that contract?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And the final report of this committee, item 13, are the contracts that are below committee approval threshold that are here for your information and note. Colleagues, can we agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Can I thank you for your participation here this morning. I hope you're well and I hope you continue to be well, and we'll see you at committee in the near future. Thanks very much, colleagues. Thanks for your time.
Thanks to the
Thank you, Chair.
Very well. Thank you.